Well, we're excited about this webinar today. Adobe has always been a world leader on the tech front. And by the way, fun fact: I was a part of a founding company that spun out of Adobe in 1999 called Picture IQ with Bill McCoy, the then CTO of Adobe. And we took the Adobe imaging libraries and we built servers to automate the sharing of images and graphics across mobile networks. So I have a lot of history with Adobe technology and got to know those imaging libraries pretty well. But things have changed a lot in the last 25 years. And now Adobe really is on the cutting edge of so many industries when it comes to creativity and supporting creators. And that's what we're going to talk about today, specifically with regards to retail space. So really excited. We've got great co-panelists that are going to be doing some live presentations for us today. And then we have a special case study with Home Depot that is going to be that we've recorded that Home Depot is going to present with Adobe here after the presentations. I encourage everybody to ask a lot of questions. Please ask questions. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So if you haven't seen it, um, sometimes it's under the more, the little three dots with the more at the bottom, and you'll see the Q&A button. If you make use of that, we will look to try to get your questions answered within the presentation. If we don't get to those questions, we can have a follow-up and make sure that your questions get answered. So without further ado, I think we get this webinar started. Again, I'm Pete Erickson with Modev. We're ecosystem builders and market builders, and we'd love to get involved around emerging technologies and bring the right people together. And it looks like certainly we have a lot of that happening today. So this is right where in our sweet spot. Our panelists today are Marta Frattini with Adobe and Matthew Gives with Adobe. I'm going to have them do their own introductions here real quickly, and then we'll push out our first poll question after their quick introductions. So Marta and Matthew, can you please introduce yourselves? And I see Marta on the left, so I'm going to start with you, Marta, then we'll go to Matthew. Then we'll push out our first poll question and get started. Marta, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure, and thanks everyone for joining us. I lead industry strategy and marketing for retail and consumer goods at Adobe. I've actually spent about 20 years in retail myself. I was running CRM personalization and scale initiatives at companies like Brooks Brothers, Gap, and other retailers globally. I'm actually originally from Italy. I saw someone in the chat being Italian as well. But right now I'm based in the US, and I've been at Adobe for about 3 years now.
Thank you, Marta. Matthew.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So I'm Matthew. Bit like Marta, different industry, but I've been in media and entertainment for the last 30 years. I'm obviously a bit older than Marta. And I spent 15 years of those making TV shows for a living. So I worked at the BBC for most of that, making everything from studio shows to features to documentaries. Spent a lot of time in science documentaries. So I know a little bit about volcanoes and oceans and tectonic plate movement. And then I brought that to Adobe, and I've been at Adobe for the last 15 years, working on media and entertainment workflows with originally Premiere Pro and After Effects customers, and then through various other things, through to Adobe Firefly Foundry, which is what we're going to talk about today.
Fantastic. And Matthew, I'll follow up with you about the one if you could play it off the coast of Washington State, because that's my old hometown. And I want to get your take on the big one. Excellent. Well, we're really excited. We're going to push out our first poll question. And if I can ask my producer behind the scenes, Jess Harder. Jess, can you go ahead and read that poll question and push it out? And then we're going to turn it over to Matthew to get us started. All right. So first poll question. I'll go ahead and read it. Where is your organization currently in its generative AI adoption journey? So a number of options to choose from here. And this will give us an opportunity to really understand where folks are. So yeah, exploring use cases and internal education, running limited pilots, deploying Gen AI in specific business functions, scaling Gen AI, or building AI native workflows, governance, and operations. And it looks like number one and three are leading the charge here, exploring and deploying. And some limited pilots. Would love it if everybody could take these polls. It really helps a lot. It really helps us understand where folks are sitting. Oh, looks like deploying Gen AI in specific functions is leading the charge. This is fantastic.
I tried to vote Peter. He wouldn't allow me as a panelist, but we're
Oh,
doing
yes,
just
I
fine.
know.
We're deploying.
Yes, I'm sure you are. That's fantastic. Excellent. Well, this is looking great. Well, this will give our uh, moderators here an opportunity to understand where you all are. So this is great. Almost really fits, I think, where the market is today. So thank you so much, everybody. And if you haven't taken them yet, take the poll. And again, reminder, use that Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If anything comes to mind, what questions come to mind, this is our opportunity to ask the experts. And with that, I'm going to turn my camera off and turn this over to Matthew. Matthew, thanks. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Peter. So yeah, hello everybody again. My name is Matthew Jives. Um, I'm a Brit based in San Francisco. I've been here for nearly 10 years now, at Adobe for nearly 15, as I say, working across a number of media and entertainment workflows. So I'm going to be talking generally about Adobe's AI journey and the things that we do and the things we do differently. And then we'll apply some of that to the world of retail as well. Some of the examples you might have to use your imagination with, in that they're media and entertainment workflows that we're sort of moving across, but we'll come to that in a moment. And so the main thing I'm going to be covering today is actually something called Adobe Firefly Foundry. And that's the focus. And Foundry is really around how do we help a customer take their IP and essentially create what is really a foundational model around their content. But before I get to that, let me explain a little bit about the journey of Adobe of AI at Adobe and how we approach it a bit differently to everybody else. And so at this bottom layer here of governance, this is a really critical part, because it's a big differentiator between us and the rest of the industry. Adobe's obviously one of the world's biggest stock content creators, and when we started in the AI world, which is over a decade ago, we've been working in machine learning and AI for well over a decade, and we have hundreds of engineers who work in that space. But when we started on the Gen AI side of things, we started with stock content that we owned the IP rights to, and then we started to buy content that we explicitly had the rights to train on. And so that means we're the only truly commercially safe model at scale in the industry. We know the provenance of every file that's gone into our solution, and we have the IP and copyright rights for all of that. Given that we're at the center of the creative economy, we also compensate creators who contribute to our model. So if you say, here, I've got some content that I'd be happy for you to train on, you are compensated for that. So we remain ethical in terms of supporting creators who want to embrace some of these AI technologies. And we also one of the co-founders of the Content Authenticity Initiative, because we think it's important that people know what is and what isn't AI content. And so we're a commercial, ethical, responsible model, and we take that very seriously. And even though that wasn't the glamorous thing when the AI boom started, it's proven to be very important. I think customers respect the fact that we respect copyright and IP, and we're not infringing on it. This is different to other models. Most large models have scraped the internet for content. That's how they've built their models. And there's benefits to that, but there's ideologically some challenges in that as well if you're an IP creator. So sitting above our governance is our models. And so with Adobe Firefly, you have a range of models, images, vectors, video, audio, a range of modalities that match really the tool set from Adobe. So you can start to create lots of different content in lots of different ways with the Firefly model. We do recognize there are times when third-party models make sense. An example I sometimes give is if you're developing a zombie video game with blood and guts and gore and whatever else is in it, Firefly actually has guardrails that would prevent you from making that content. And so it wouldn't be useful to you. But if that's what you need to do and you're inside Photoshop or you're inside After Effects, a third-party model might be the right place for that. So we partner with lots of models to make them available. What's great for you as well is we're an aggregator now. So all of the models are in one place. So instead of paying for 12 subscriptions, you've actually got it all in one place, and you can just retire credits against any of the models, Firefly or the third party. And then critically, this lives within a workflow. Models are only interesting to a point. They have to be part of a pipeline. And so all of our models surface within Creative Cloud applications or within Marketing Cloud applications or indeed Dot Cloud. And you'll find them right inside there. And I'll show some examples of that later. And so it's part of your workflow. You're not going in and out. It's there, it's embedded, whether you're in boards or you're in Photoshop. you can find the application, you can find the model right inside the application. And then we have this area of customization where I'm just going to spend a minute. So this is, if you like, the spectrum of customization of AI at Adobe. So the first is the base model. I just talked about this, commercially safe. It's enterprise grade. We have millions of customers that are using it every day. And it's great as a general model. It's a general model across lots of modalities. It doesn't recognize IP. Like I said, if you type in Nike or Apple or McDonald's into our base model, you won't get results. And that's intentional. That's a feature. It's not a bug. It's never seen that content, so it doesn't know what it is. But a great general model. Many of our customers, actually, particularly in retail, were saying, we love that, but we'd love to customize it a little bit to our world. And so with custom models, which have been around 18 months, 2 years now, you can take 20 to 30 images. It's an image only model, and you can self-serve that. And you can start to put those images into an interface, and it's self-serve, and you start to lightly tune the model. And this is great for a single concept. So maybe a visual style, an illustration, or a character. And you can start to tune the model to get the kind of outputs that you want. You can then start to hook that up to APIs, and you can start to automate that. So custom models work brilliantly for maybe a point in time, maybe a campaign, your spring season. And we have lots of customers that are using that today with really good results. But if you really want to have your whole brand described, that's Firefly Foundry. You can't have an understanding of an entire brand with just 20 or 30 images. So with Foundry, conceptually, we take that base model, we crack it open. Now, for the first time, we add your IP inside, and now we deeply tune on that content. And this is very different to like light edge tuning. This is, if you had the time, the money, the resources to build your own foundational model, this is what you would end up with. We shortcut that for you. So you have the Firefly as the foundations, and then we put your IP on top. We deeply tune it. We put some of our best AI engineers, PhD level AI scientists into that conversation and into that engagement. And what's great about that is you've got someone to talk to. So if you're not getting quite the results, you've got somebody who's going to tune it. They're going to change the weights inside the model. They're going to pull the levers to get you the exact kind of outputs that you need. And this is across all modalities. This is video, this is audio, this is imagery. And we will train on all of those modalities as well. So you can give us scripts, you can give us documents, you can give us brand guidelines, and we'll start to put that into the model. And what you start to get now is a high level of consistency. You're starting to get exactly your brand assets every time. And you're starting to get the value now, the return on investment, because you're not wasting time prompting and prompting and prompting. You're getting exactly what you would expect to get with a level of precision and consistency, because we're trained around your assets and only your assets. Well, not only, but like tailored to your assets. In fact, if you take a clothing analogy, the first one is off the shelf, off the peg. The second one is customized. The third one is truly bespoke and tailored for you. And so what this does is it changes the way that you actually approach content creation, because now, we're used to all having a set of brand guidelines, but in this world, now you've got a brand model. And now this model can be accessed, whether you're the marketing team who's starting to make social content, or you're the design team who's actually doing pre-visualization or maybe some ideation around a new concept, or you're the partner team who's working with merchandisers to on point of sale or on branded goods, or partners with things like agencies. Everyone now can start to access this brand safe model. Now, of course, you're going to put guardrails on top of that and workflow. There'll be review and approval built in, but essentially you've got a model that understands your world and that all of your teams can start to access. So in a bit of summary, Foundry is the models deeply tuned around your world, commercially safe, responsible, ethical AI with your IP on top as part of a platform built into the workflow, and with experts there along the way, making sure that you're getting the outputs that you need. A couple of quick examples just as recently of how Foundry has been used. This one's interesting because essentially when you think about the sphere, it's a giant billboard. It happens to be spherical, but that creates some challenges. And actually what we did this time, this is the second year we've advertised on the sphere around Adobe Summit. This time we used a Foundry model to understand the physics of this space. So it was less about the content and more about transferring content into this very unique environment. And that was hugely beneficial to us. The Foundry model did a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of creating assets and applying them to this space, to the point that we made twice as much content this year as we did the year before. And it was Foundry that helped drive that pipeline along. Another couple of quick examples. And again, this is where you need to use your imagination. These are media and entertainment workflows, but imagine these into a more of a retail setting. So this is an IP called Spring. It's an open source Blender project. It's been seen many millions of times online. It won some awards. And this is actually much smaller amount of content than we would typically train on. This is only about 12 minutes. Typically, we would have hours, we'd have thousands of images. But what starts to get interesting here, you can see the Foundry model is baked in to the UI. And what's interesting, I can prompt for young girl, brown hair. It knows who that means because it's been trained on Spring. It understands who that is. And in this workflow, I've got a still frame, and now I'm prompting and turning that into an animated frame. So I can very quickly start to block out and ideate what this animation might be, or it may even be final frame. In this one, it's the same idea. But again, you're trying to capture the emotion here. So the Foundry model understands the emotion and the sentiment behind this. So something is behind her, chasing her, and you can sort of see the fear in her young eyes, which is, but it's done a good job in sort of capturing that sense of emotion. And again, it's consistent each time. It's the same character. Where this starts to get interesting and is applicable, I think, to maybe some of the retail workflows is, imagine if you take this IP and now you're going to transfer it into a different environment. So here we're inside boards, Firefly boards, and the Foundry model is baked in, and it's this Spring model. And here we're using actually customized birthday cards. So these could be any kinds of customized greetings to your consumers. But if you remember, we were in a forest before. We weren't on a mountainside. But with this workflow, we're able to take the same IP, keep it consistent. In this case, actually, I'm using a sketch to say, this is exactly the frame I want. Using that sketch to create a still. And once I've got that still, turning that into a video. But the point here is the IP is consistent regardless of how I apply that, whether it's in a skiing world or whether it's, we're going to skip through Spring's message, whether it's in a skiing world, or I could now take this and start to put it into scaled workflows. So with Graph, which is a node builder, here what I'm doing is each of these nodes is an operation. And so now I'm saying, okay, allow people to put an input of their kid's name and their favorite hobby, start to customize that on a prompt, but keep the IP accurate based around the Spring IP. And so here, whether you're a soccer player or whether you're into basketball, you get these customized outputs built on that IP, where it's consistent across the content, but is tailored to that individual. So you can imagine a number of applications where you would apply that in a retail environment. This one is a retail environment. This is the last example I'll show you. So here you're going to hear more from the Home Depot in a moment. But here we've actually got the Foundry model baked into Premiere Pro. And so what's happening here is we've got a sequence and we're missing a shot. And as you can see, the Foundry model is right there in the timeline. And I'm going to make a close-up of a doorbell. Now, either they forgot to get it or the shot didn't work or whatever it might be. Now, this is not any doorbell. This is the specific doorbell that they're selling. And it's got the look and feel of the Home Depot's aesthetic. That's like a pastel look, again, on a regular suburban home. So everything here is tied to the brand. But actually, this is obviously a video workflow. We want to turn that into a video. You saw that before. So this is really the application of that same idea. Now I'm saying, okay, make me a video of somebody coming in and pressing the doorbell. And so sure enough, in comes a finger, presses the doorbell. Now, on the face of it, you might say it looks really relatively trivial, but any of us who've worked in video or marketing know to do this live, I've got to get a location and people and the props and the permissions and the money and the crew and hope the lighting's right and hope it's not raining. Here, I'm just creating it on brand directly inside the timeline. Huge time saving and huge amounts of flexibility. Particularly if you're a video editor, you'll be very familiar with this kind of workflow. So that was my section, giving you a kind of an overview of Foundry, and I'm going to hand over to Marta, who's going to talk a little bit more about the strategy of retail. And Marta, would you like to take the screen share?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Can you see my screen?
I think I've just stopped sharing, so if you share again now.
Yes, I can see your screen,
Okay,
Marta. Thank you.
perfect. Thank you so much. So yes, thank you so much, Matt, for that overview and kickoff. It is always so exciting. So as I mentioned before, I lead industry strategy for the retail industry at Adobe, so I work across a lot of our retail customers. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what do we see as Adobe happen in the industry and give some ideas of like how can Gen AI really change the way people are working in retail, before we hear more directly and more specifically from Home Depot. So the content explosion is a problem that I think, as someone who has spent 20 years in retail, we are all facing. This is not something new, right? First and foremost, we all have, as retailers and brands and consumer goods companies, an exposure and awareness goal, right? We need the reach, we need the frequency. When I think about that, it's not just content, right? Customers need to be exposed from our research to about 28 to 29 pieces of content before they make a purchase from your brand. And it's not just any content. It's, first of all, content that needs to be relevant to them. So it needs to be produced and activated in the context of what are they looking for? How are they trying to engage with your brand? It's content that needs to be fresh. That's a reality, right? Like if they're seeing your brand 28, 29, 30 times, you don't want it to feel repetitive. You don't want consumers to tune out. And then you have on top of that, all of your business and market dynamics. Like you have new product launches that require new content. You have PDP pages that convert better the more product images you have. You have seasonality, you have promos, etc. So all of this is like really driven by how retail companies drive their business. In addition to that, there's a whole other dimension we are hearing more and more. First and foremost is making good on your investments you made somewhere else. I think one of the things that we see the most in retail as an industry has done so much work around the data. You have built CDPs, you have built campaign management, you have brought intelligence in, you're more advanced than others in really using intelligence and AI. But in order to really maximize the type of investment you have done, you need the content, and you need the content tagged properly to be able to actually activate those campaigns. Otherwise, you just bought a super powerful machine that cannot run. So content is not just needed in itself for everything we covered before, but content is needed to also allow for other investments to really maximize the value and the impact. The other aspect is what we call algorithmic reward. I think it's getting more and more clear to everyone that platforms like Google, Facebook, Meta, they really value content diversity. They do really promote brands that are able to provide and feed different formats, different styles, different creatives, different copies, etc. And that is also, by the way, true for all of the experimentation that all of us as brands want and need to run. There's not a day that goes without an A/B test. And A/B tests do drive, obviously, winning experiences and better conversion and better results. But all of that, again, increasing exponentially the amount of assets that you need to feed into the system. And it's not just the volume, it's the speed to market that is growing dramatically. There is more and more expectations from the consumer to pay attention to your brand, that you're able to actually respond to cultural moment, that you support your frequent product drops, that your offers and promotions are dynamic, respond to the commercial pressures, etc. So, of course, as Adobe, creative being in our DNA, we have worked on a lot of generative AI projects. And these are actually numbers from research we did with about 500 retail and consumer goods executive globally. For those who are using generative AI, and there's many of you on this call, so I was very excited to see the results of the poll in the beginning. The benefits are real. what we see is a 30 to 40% benefit in lower cost per content piece, quicker production, quicker time to market. I think what is particularly interesting is that we are also really starting to see real top line benefits and conversion increases. We are seeing on average about 8% increase in conversion. And the drivers for that are twofold. One, once you start using AI, generative AI, as I said, you can create more content. So we talked about the experimentation. We talked about really rewarding that creative variety and diversity, right? So that translates directly into better experiences, higher conversion, higher revenues. The other aspect of that is that with the tagging and with the intelligence that we can now put behind the creative and the data, you are able to also continue to inform the type of creative that you produce and produce creative that in itself performs better. So in a world in which in retail we have all spent so many hours, days, months analyzing campaign performance, we can now also analyze content performance. I also wanted to give a few of the use cases and ideas that we see as like the most prominent in the retail industry when it comes to generative AI. And right after this, we will hear from Home Depot and go a lot deeper into how they are using it, both from a business perspective, but also in general, how they think about it from an organizational and change management perspective. But I think the first thing and where we see most of our retail customers and partners start is really in this scaling creative asset production, in particular when it comes to versioning, right? So all of these use cases, by the way, are available on the Adobe website if you want to like understand more in detail what the different brands have done. But if I start with Estée Lauder as an example, and I think this is really one of the most common we see, like one of the objections we often hear when it comes to generative AI is, what about the brand? And that's exactly what Estée Lauder did, right? Estée Lauder kept that creative control of the campaign very tight, whether it's internal creative team, whether it's agencies, they are controlling what the hero campaign looks like, but they are leveraging generative AI for the versioning and to create all the different banners and formats that are needed to actually activate across omnichannel experiences. Similarly, FreshDirect trained generative AI on the aesthetic of their holiday campaign and holiday imagery, and that allowed them to really speed up the pace at which they can create seasonal campaign assets at scale. And not just the speed, but it also unlocked a lot of opportunities for localization, which in an industry like grocery is extremely important as you need to respond to the needs of the specific stores, markets, and regions. The other area where we really see generative AI shine is the accelerating the creative ideation, whether that's ideating on a campaign or in this case, ideating on physical products. So in the case of Mattel, as an example, they use generative AI to really accelerate packaging and design. The packaging for Barbie is part of the story. It's part of the product. It sells the product. And so it was really critical and strategic for them to be able to use generative AI to do rapid sketching, high quality mockups of those backgrounds and packages, and not just for production, but also to improve team alignment early on between product, creative, marketing teams, and make sure that everyone has a better sense of where are we going with this and are we really on the same page. And then Tapestry with Kate Spade as well as Coach, they trained the model to really understand their brand aesthetic, but also train them on some of their best-selling products. And they use that to ideate on new patterns and create digital twins. Digital twins that they create once, used everywhere. So they can be used not only in the production life cycle, but also as an example, as imagery to submit to focus groups for early customer feedback. They use them in marketing assets. They use them, Kate Spade specifically also uses them to mock up in-store assortment and understand what the store might look like. So again, this entire ideation cycle is really supercharged by generative AI. And then I think the third pillar to this is like generative AI accelerates creation, but that's a node, right? And if you only accelerate the node, the whole cycle is still going to break. I think about this more as like the pipes. You need to leverage AI and generative AI, not just or not only in the content creation, but also in how do you actually manage, automate, and activate all of the assets that you need to run at the speed and scale of retail. So a couple of examples I have here. One is Best Buy, where they really used AI and automation to work through how do you tag and activate all the image variations that you need for all the different SKUs, whether that's size, color, or specs of a laptop or of a phone, and apply the right metadata to that to be able to actually reduce the time that it takes you to launch new product to the market. And then Under Armour is another very interesting example where they are actually using AI-powered metadata to be able to tag the content and make it more findable and more reusable by the team using one source truth of asset management that is easy to search, easy to activate from, right? And when you think about leveraging AI for things like meta tagging, in an industry like retail, so much of your tagging comes from your PIM system, right? But there's still so much that lives in the image itself, whether that's a group shot, a family shot, whether there's a cat featured in it, whether that's a winter or a summer image. So that's critical not only to recover the imagery, but also to be able to understand performance. So I talked briefly before about how the industry is moving from just campaign performance measurement to content performance measurement. This is an example of what I was mentioning there. Once you start using AI to really tag your assets in a deeper, more nuanced way, you can aggregate those tags as well from a reporting perspective to really understand what's working, what's not working in your creative and imagery, what's working for specific audiences of customers or specific campaigns, and how do you actually inform your creative pipeline to produce more of the assets that perform best. So these are some of the examples that I thought might be interesting for anyone who is either starting on their Gen AI journey or is on the journey and just wants to accelerate and expand and bring new ideas to life. Matt, before we hear from the Home Depot, I think one question I have for you, because you talk so much about Foundry, is what is the difference that you see? And I was thinking about this as I was looking at the answers from the initial poll as well, right? Like, what are some of the differences you see between brands that might be running these Gen AI experiments as like pilot, as successful as they are, versus what does it take to actually run these at an enterprise scale?
Yeah, some of that comes down to actually one of the biggest things can be people conceptually love the idea of we want to use Gen AI, but what is the specific use case? Like, what's the exact thing that you're trying to solve for? And also, what's your biggest business problem? The sooner we can identify that, the sooner we can start to apply solutions to it. So I think some of it's about narrowing the scope of exactly what you want to achieve. And then it's usually about how you apply workflow on top of the models. The models themselves obviously are critical. Foundry is going to create imagery and video that is on brand. But how you operationalize that is critical. So how do you start to put things like Firefly services? I showed some of the graph workflows there where I'm putting nodes together. But how do I start to build a scaled workflow is usually the key. The model is great, but then it's the workflow you apply on top of it.
Thank you, Matthew and Marta. Before we move on to the Home Depot video, there were a couple questions. I thought maybe we'll take those on real quickly and then we'll move to the video. So the first question is AI seems to be rapidly commoditizing content creation from where there is the longer term content competitive advantage, if at all. Data, brand development, distribution, relationships, what becomes more valuable on balance as content creation, some people talk about that kind of the race to the bottom, but certainly Adobe knows brand about as well as anybody. But why don't you take that question on real quick and then we'll move to the next one.
I mean, I've got a bit of a take on that, which I think taste and aesthetic really rise up. Having humans in the loop, to be able to determine what is good and what is not. For me, it's the Rick Rubin approach. So Rick Rubin can't play instruments, he can't drive a mixing desk, but people pay him millions of dollars to make their albums because he understands taste and he understands what he thinks is good and not. That's really where we are with the AI journey, is having designers, having marketers, having brand owners in the mix who can shape what the content is, both on the input and moderating it on the output, is really critical. AI has so many great things it can do, but actually having that human eye, I still think is important in great content creation.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the thing I would add is that I'm actually seeing a resurgence of the importance of brand, um, if anything, because with content overload also comes people actually disconnecting. There's a real reaction that starts to build of I'm tuning out because this is so clearly AI. And the problem is not AI, is AI's law, right? So making sure that you are clear, what is your brand, what do you stand for, and that any AI tool that you use understands and brings to life your brand just as well as you would do it is absolutely critical.
Yeah, thank you both so much for answering that live. Looks like we've got a few more questions here, real quick. So, how much risk is there of deepfake? So, somebody can take that beautiful content that you're creating with Firefly, right, and then just use a model, create a deepfake of that. What sort of steps are you seeing out there in the marketplace to sort of like to prepare for that risk and like to offset that?
Yeah, a couple of things there. I mean, obviously with Foundry, we we train on the model and we give you brand safe assets, but we also build in guardrails. So there are lots of things that either your internal teams or external teams will never be able to create from a Foundry model. So that means if you don't want people to create nefarious, imagery with your content, we can put guardrails in to actually block that even happening. So that's one side of things.
Mm.
Um, I think the other side is the content authenticity initiative, doing more around metadata and tagging so that people know what is and what isn't AI, and making sure that that metadata travels with the assets. I mean, look, the reality is people have always been able to do things with imagery, from faking oil paintings 400 years ago to airbrushing and doing retouching with Photoshop through to today. So there's always things that people can do, but I think through things like responsible approaches and then metadata tagging and watermarking are some of the things that we're trying to do through the content authenticity initiative and those standards, to make that as hard, I suppose, as possible.
Yeah, I love the analogy. Let's do this. Let's get this video queued up because I think we want to play that. There are some more questions here, and just folks know that we're going to get to these questions. But let's get this video going, and then we'll have some time at the end for some final Q&A. How about that? How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Great. Jess, go ahead and cue the video. And here we go.
Hi, I'm Hannah Elsaker, Vice President of Gen AI New Businesses at Adobe, and I'm delighted today to welcome Stacy Santana from the Home Depot. She's the Senior Director of Marketing Operations, and we have been on a journey exploring how responsible AI can power her creative content supply chain. So Stacy, you've joined us in New York City in our Times Square office today, and I would love for you to share with our audience a little bit about your role and maybe also frame that in Home Depot's current priorities.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. It's really great to be here. Stacy Santana, and as Hannah mentioned, I lead marketing operations for the Home Depot. And it's a very diverse role, and we span all things from content production and creation down to the technology enablement, process design, implementation, and just supporting our marketers to do the best that they do. And really relevant when we think about content supply chain, and we'll get into that in a moment. But the vision for the Home Depot is simple and complex. We really aim to give the customer the best experience possible. And that can mean the best brands, the best assortment, the best prices. That can also mean really helpful information so that you're able to complete your project confidently.
And I love what you said about making sure the customer feels educated in the process. So Stacey, we've talked a lot about this. I, of course, am the do-it-yourself gardener who does projects, but you're serving such a wide audience, from the pro segment, maybe multi-language speakers, the do-it-yourself, And that creates a lot of complexity. We'll get into the content in a minute, but just even how you think about audience, how you think about being authentic and true to each of the segments.
For sure. It is incredibly complex. And so tons of different customer journeys. When you think about that pro contractor who could be looking for materials to be delivered to their job site or have the right materials ready for them at the store so that they're able to start their job on time and on budget. Thinking about empowering customers who are taking on different projects within their home, and also educating them on how to choose a paint sheen or how to plant a garden or prepare their garden for the season. The really interesting aspect is that you could also be one of these customers at any time throughout that journey. And so the amount of content that we need is really vast. It's very important to us too that all of our content be very much on brand. It's very genuine, authentic. And so we need a very dense content library.
And this is part of how we met. Actually, I met Molly, your CMO, who you work with, and of course, Whit, who runs all your creative direction. And you really emphasize this, which is around authenticity and trust. Every product has to be perfect, right? And we talked about the drill bit has to be the right drill bit for the drill.
Yes.
Safety, how we're holding tools. This is all part of why people walk in to the Home Depot and trust you for your advice. And this gets us into how we work together. Obviously, you've been a great customer across the journeys, the complex journeys, having the right customer data, the analytics, et cetera. But then you and I started talking about not enough content.
Yeah.
So maybe just talk about how we started saying, well, the problem's actually not enough personalized content.
I mean, and we have a lot of it, but when you really think about where this customer is and at these various points on their journey where they may be seeking inspiration before they're ready to tackle the project, we need a lot of it, and it needs to feel very much like the Home Depot, right? The moment that we show a measuring tape that doesn't have the right, measurements on it, we lose credibility. And as a company who we like to say that we invented DIY, it's very important to us to make sure that we get this right.
And this is where, in the space of personalized content, and you're no stranger to responsible AI. Introducing AI into that equation can both be a helper, but in some cases, in the early days, when you're using kind of off-the-shelf models,
that's right,
it wasn't getting all the way there.
That's right.
This is where we felt like going to a Foundry deep tuning model that understood the cues and the brand was really important. Maybe you can just talk about that discovery journey that we went through together.
The early models, the early days, we piloted a few image concepts, and directionally, they looked accurate. But when you look closely, you see that the saw blade doesn't quite go through the wood, or maybe we're missing some parts. And that's just where we really focus a lot, again, on those details and just making sure that we're authentic to ourselves, we're authentic to our customers, and we're also really giving them the information that they need to be able to complete that project or make that purchasing decision.
When we started talking about, we never try to implement technology for the sake of technology. But when we started talking about the use cases you're going after, it has to be correct. It has to be accurate. It has to be in the brand,
right?
Style, the lifestyle, the talent surrounding that has to be wearing the right clothes. That's when we said, really the only solution is Firefly Foundry and deep tuning in a managed service, especially since all of you from top leadership down really cares about IP protection.
Right, as brand safe.
As well. So, maybe we'll talk a little bit about the process of that we went through and getting to some use cases. And
we went through many secrets. No, I mean, when the opportunity presented itself, it was so exciting, but there was skepticism of, we've seen the base models. Right. We see that they're probably directionally correct for a storyboard or something more internal facing. But again, when it comes to putting anything in front of our customers, we just take that so seriously. And so really tried to come up with the right use cases. We had several. So we thought about, could we replicate some of our job site imagery, because that's very expensive, complicated, and time consuming to create. We had done some base models, and the images had multiple roof lines and tiny shovels. And, that wasn't, we weren't getting what we needed out of those base models. So that was one. We also looked at delivery,
Right.
and then looked at some of our informational content.
Right.
And I can say with confidence that we gave you our most complicated, complex use case, and are really excited to see the results of that.
And so maybe just from a technical standpoint, what Adobe is doing behind the scenes is obviously our Firefly family of models are commercially safe to start with, because we've licensed every piece of data. So that was really important to the Home Depot and to your leadership team. Then what we do is we go kind of back in checkpoints. We open the model. You gave us data,
Much data
that you knew you had rights to.
That's right.
Including SKUs, talent, lifestyle, imagery. And then we retrained. We went through more checkpoints to train, and then we close that up and we show you the results. And I do think it's really interesting around the types of content we can get out. We're focusing first on stills, and making sure you and the team have enough fresh still content with the right products positioned the right way. So Stacey, let's talk about the people and the teams that are involved. Your team has actually been really leaned forward in embracing transformation of the content supply chain, which is terrific. But how did you approach the problem, the people, the workflows in this huge question?
Right. So a few different tracks there. One is we have been really focused on transforming our end-to-end campaign process. And so ours is fairly complex, as you guys could imagine, but really taking a hard look at all the steps in the process. Can we reduce complexity? And we're well on our way there. We have also really been looking at our systems and our platforms, and just making sure that we have the right best-in-class platforms and software in place to enable our marketers to create the best marketing content that they can. And that's included so far. We're on our journey of implementing Adobe Experience Manager. So we have a central source of truth for our content. We've had Workfront in place also. So connecting these two with the vision of automating and enabling the content to move through the supply chain much faster and easier.
Okay, so here's the elephant in the room, right? Generative AI unlocks lots of additional on-brand content, especially if you do it with a responsible partner like Adobe and Foundry. But at the same time, marketing and creative roles may shift a little. But why don't you talk about that relationship, how it shifted, and just kind of take us on that journey?
Yeah, it's been really fun. We have a lot of cross-functional teams at the table. And that's what's been really great about this initiative is we've got my team, so marketing ops certainly leading a role here too. We have our content team at the table. We also have the creative team, as well as our own Studio Orange at the table, really working together to solve the problem, to work closely with Adobe. And so rather than it just being one singular team, it's a whole group of folks who are learning this new way of working. So when you think about the need to scale this end-to-end workflow, the content supply chain, as we call it, getting this tool and this platform and just this capability in the hands of others is really incredible and empowering, and knowing that we're doing so in a brand safe way. So what we're generating, we know will be reflective of our brand, is even more empowering.
So one tension that does come up sometimes is because we're able in a Foundry model to shorten the time between a brief, a concept, to literally final pixel image, you are changing the workflow a little bit. And it does become a tension point. We have teams, the creative side, who say, I do want to empower marketing, but I also want to still retain creative voice. How do you think about that tug and pull?
We've been spending quite a lot of time really looking at that process, really understanding the handoffs, really understanding like what can we put in the hands of marketers versus what needs to sit and solely live within creative. And that's where you get into Adobe Express. So templates, having brand safe templates that are ready, that are connected into the workflow, that we can pop an image into or a headline into, and we know that everything's already pre-approved, vetted. It really enables us to go faster, but it is a team effort. And that is one of my biggest takeaways with AI is it's an incredible, powerful capability, but it's not a silver bullet. And so anyone who's embarking on this journey, I would really encourage you to dig into your process, really look at where you can simplify and streamline, and then AI becomes additive on top of that.
I'm going to quote you because one of your favorite phrases is you can't AI your way out of bad process.
I wish, but you can't. I mean, maybe one day.
You can't. Earlier, Stacey, we talked about how you trusted Adobe enough to really give us the hardest problems.
We did.
And we appreciate you for that.
Right.
And also have spent a lot of time together.
Right.
One of those is really video.
That's right.
And we've discussed the stats around how video engagement is like 9 times more engaging than static if you think about click-through for audience. And we've also talked about how content ages very quickly. It's wild, right? It used to be, oh, if you put an asset out 2 weeks later, it's going to be dead on arrival. But now it turns into minutes and hours and days. And so if you just think about the math of how much it costs you to produce a 40-second promo and how long, the only answer for that is having brand safe IP models around AI.
Right.
So video. How are you thinking about video output?
Yeah, this was where we came to. So we gave you guys our most complex use case. Job site wasn't hard enough. Delivery wasn't complex enough. And so we decided, why not try video? And to be honest, we didn't know how this would turn out. We hadn't really seen a lot of outputs of video that would give us a lot of confidence that we could make this happen. And so here we are. And just knowing like how quickly content ages, knowing this content gap that we had, if we really wanted to make sure we were giving customers the right content throughout their journey, why not try? And even doing video internally takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can do this and scale, it'd be awesome.
You know, just to give another stat, maybe from another Foundry customer who's in the media and entertainment space. So for them, final frame for theatrical or YouTube or Netflix is really, really important. For a promo, they might spend, $8,000 to $10,000 per minute. When you get to Netflix and above quality, you're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per minute. And that content does age very, very quickly. What we've seen in those cases is once we have a well-fit, trained model, they're able to take work that used to take them, let's say, 2 weeks and more, and they'll be able to storyboard and get to final stuff in hours. So as we're on this journey, I think what we're seeing is there should be massive efficiency for you to be able to reach all those personalized segments that we talked about earlier.
That's the goal. And even though we're not quite at the point where we have video as an output, we do have a model that we can use internally, again, for those storyboards, for those video keyframes, and directionally, some great starts.
So Stacey, I mean, again, for the marketers and the creative directors who are joining us, if they are just starting on this journey, of course, you're at a scaling point. You've been working on this, and we're scaling for not experiments, but for large global businesses. What are the couple tips? Like, where would you focus and say, don't forget about these couple of things?
Yeah, I would definitely, again, just start with the process. Go through your process, make sure it is streamlined, simplified, again, ready for scale, ready for automation, whatever your vision is. I would also really think heavily around the training that is going to be involved to get your creatives and your marketers to adopt this technology. Even just as we were mentioning earlier, the prompting is a whole new skill set. And so how do we train our internal teams to craft and deliver the right prompts so that they get the best output?
Right. Right. And I will add that because I've witnessed this from you and Molly and from Wit, you're sponsoring this from the front.
That's right.
Meaning like you've raised your hand and you've told the teams, we're going to lean in and do this.
We're going to try.
And we're going to try. And I think that was really important signaling for the organization to say it is a new technology, but we are going to lean in and learn. And it is change management.
It is. It's significant change management. It's change management in just how we work. But I think the output is going to be really strong.
Yeah. And maybe just to pick up on an earlier point that you said is know where your data is.
That's right. Yeah. So make sure in that process, streamlining and simplifying, just mindset, make sure your assets are tagged, make sure your data is ready for this, because whether it's AI or again, just automation and acceleration, you're going to need that.
Terrific. Stacy, thank you so much for joining me in this conversation about getting started with Adobe Foundry.
Thank you, Hannah, and thanks for all your guidance along the way.
We've had a lot of fun, and I hope this audience also has learned a lot from Home Depot's journey and will become more curious about how to get started with Adobe Foundry.
Excellent. Jess, thank you so much. Matthew and Marta, welcome back. Wow, we've had a packed hour. It goes quickly, doesn't it? Well, looks like we have a few questions, so let's rapid fire, try to get to these questions before we have final thoughts and wrap up for the day. So Olga asked, can you talk more about single source of truth and maybe a bit more on automated metadata? That's a couple questions, but maybe hit real quickly on single source of truth.
Yeah, and Matt, if you want to add anything, but very quickly, and Stacy somewhat touched on that as well. What I was talking about there specifically is our digital asset management approach and product. So it's the idea of really bringing, sure, you create the assets, all these assets with Gen AI, then you have to manage them, activate them, etc. So how can you also leverage AI and automation on that side of the house in addition to the creation itself?
Thank you. Thank you so much. Anonymous asks, do you think AI will expand Adobe seats by making creative tools easier for more employees? Or do you think it's going to maybe shift the model in different ways, more towards content-based generation? Any thoughts on that, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, we have a kind of an approach of putting the AI inside the tools, and so I think that is both in our professional tools in Photoshop, Premiere, and After Effects, as well as things like Adobe Express. And so I think you're just going to see more and more AI modules appearing in those different tools. It's still about choosing the right tool for the job. But when you're in there, you'll start to see more AI surface within those environments.
Very cool. Okay, so Lex, we did show the Home Depot video. This entire webinar is being recorded, and we're going to make it available on demand, so you can go back and watch any components of this video. Home Depot didn't show live demos, but talked about what they're doing. So thanks for the question, Lex. Really appreciate it. And it looks like, Fran, any work AI apps for creating try-on clothing apps? So maybe
Yeah.
is Adobe get into the VR, AR space?
Well, I saw that sort of question, and we are doing a lot with a couple of things. One, actually doing some really interesting models around fabric draping. So being able to take a still image of a garment and then actually use a model to interpret that and then place it on a mannequin. And that can either be, someone you photographed or could be an avatar mannequin, but have that material drape properly, fold properly, have the texture correct. We leverage a lot of our substance tools there, and we're doing that for things like point of sale, but also explainer videos or it might be that you're actually advertising how to hit a tennis shot, but you need them in the right clothing as well. So we're doing a lot of work to take stills and drape garments onto avatars or onto models.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Matthew. Fran had just one quick follow-up, and I know Adobe's always been really supportive of education markets and students and getting access to Adobe tools, but anything to add there before, as we wrap up?
I mean, only to say we're working with all of the institutions that we've always worked with. I was just at the Synthetic Media Summit at Santa Barbara, and so we're working with a lot of the universities who are starting to put AI courses into both their creative work, but also into their more technical courses as well. So only to say, yes, we're working very closely with all of the institutions globally who have an interest in this area.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew and Marta. Thank you so much for joining us live today. And thank you, everybody who chimed in from around the world. And looks like I might see Matthew, I might see you, and maybe Miriam next week at the AI House in London. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a lot of fun and very informative. And again, we're going to make this available on demand. We'll be getting it out to you soon. So Adobe, thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.